Hi, I'm Kenneth Bader. I'm a fossil preparator and the manager of the Osteological Prep Lab here at the University of Texas at Austin. So right now we're here in the Osteological Prep Lab where I take modern animals that died from natural causes or from roadkill and process them to make skeletons for the museum's comparative collection. For example, here we have the skull of a white rhinoceros that died from old age at a zoo. And usually we think of rhinos as being African and Asian animals, but they actually evolved here in North America. And if you turn the clock back a little over 2 million years, we have rhinoceros in North America. And we can use this skull and the rest of the skeleton of this rhinoceros for comparison with the fossils that we find here in Texas. So I started out as an undergraduate at the University of Kansas, where initially I actually went in as a pharmacy major, but I went ahead and took a paleontology class. It was something that I just really enjoyed as a kid, and I found out that I loved paleontology as an adult. I worked in the lab and actually became a very competent fossil preparator. So as a graduate student, I was working on taphonomy of dinosaurs, basically learning how they rotted and fell apart before they were buried. And to do that, I actually worked with modern animals and learned how to skeletonize animals using domestic beetles, which is one of the main processes that we use here in the lab. For several years, I continued working as a fossil preparator until moving here to the University of Texas, where I was able to take over this empty lab and start preparing modern skeletons for the collection. So a couple of years ago, we had some visiting researchers that were also working on taphonomy. In this case, they were looking at saber-toothed cats and other big cats and how they damage bones and how they scatter skeletons. And it turns out that they were doing some interesting projects in Africa, where they were walking around in the savannah, collecting modern bones and identifying them and looking at them to see what kinds of predators were actually killing and eating animals on the savannah. And I just went ahead and asked them if they had an opening, and they said, yes, come on out in the field. And I was actually able to go out there and experience Africa without being stuck in a safari truck. Probably my favorite thing is the day that I get to go out and collect more specimens from the zoos. Usually what happens is I get a call at any time of day saying, hey, this big animal, for example, this rhino has died. Usually some of these bigger animals, I have to go through and butcher them to make them, cut them up into manageable pieces to bring them back up here to the lab. In high school, I actually worked at the Kansas City Zoo. They had a volunteer program for students where I was working alongside keepers and learning just about everything I could about animal behavior. And a lot of that information that I learned stuck with me. And also interacting with zookeepers and vets at the zoo as a high school student really helped me better interact with the veterinarians at zoos today. So here's one of our freezers. This is the bird freezer, and this is where we store a lot of specimens before we're ready to process them. Here we have a adult male Cooper's hawk. So over here, this is a roadrunner, and if we hold it under the light, we might be able to see the reflection. Most people think of these as just being brown, streaky birds, but they actually have a bit of a coppery iridescence. Very pretty bird. Okay, so this room is our bug room. This is where we keep the flesh-eating domestic beetles. So they're stored in these little tubs. Okay, so if you look closely, you see a lot of these little black caterpillars. These are the flesh-eating larvae of the domestic beetles. And then these little white and black beetles are the adults. So basically, these guys like dried out desiccated flesh, and they're going to slowly remove all of the dried flesh from the bone surface and give us a nice clean specimen.